Hello and welcome to another one of my Android.Xamarin videos. Today I wanted to continue the conversation that I started with the last video where we were using SQLite to create a database for our Android.Xamarin application. And then I showed you how to put some data in there and pull that data back out. And so I want to continue this same theme with a little more stuff on SQLite, how we can get that data out, how we can manipulate it and write it back to that database. But I also wanted to show you some interesting things that you can do with our lists. So we're going to be using a ListView item in this video and some context menus for our data manipulation. So I know I haven't really talked about the context menu side of the lists before, so I figured to kind of make this a two-in-one video today as we continue to explore what we can do with the Android.Xamarin platform and our C# skills. So I'm starting here with just a regular blank Android application project, and I have went ahead and loaded in the SQLite package from NuGet that I showed you how to do in the last video. So if you need to take a second, step back, go see how to do that. And then I just wipe out the button and stuff and the main activity items that come with that blank project. So take a second, get yourself all sorted out here. And then from our last project, we had this contact class. And so we were using a name and phone number property, a couple of constructors, and a toString. So I've already added that to my solution as well. So if you need to go get that class from your previous application, that's what I did. You can just go to the solution, you can right-click, add existing item, and go pull that class in from your other project. Just make sure you update the namespace so that the namespace matches what we're using in this application, or you'll have some build issues. But those are the resources we'll be using in our app today. Okay, so let's get started by setting up our database like we learned to do last time. And so up here at a class level, we're going to set up the string that holds the path information for our database. And, I'm going to skip a step here. Using statements. We're definitely going to have to put in some using statements. So let's come up here. We're going to be using system.io, and we're also going to be using our SQLite. So make sure you get those two added in before I get ahead of myself here. So this is our string that ultimately holds the path to wherever our database file, our SQLite DB3 file resides. So we were using the system environment special folder in the personal. That is the recommended place to put these kinds of database files. And then you go ahead and give it whatever name you want to give it. If we're creating a database, remember the first time we go to use it, if it doesn't exist, then the system will go ahead and create it for us. But if it does exist, then of course it goes ahead and uses the same file so that we can keep accessing the same database. So I'm going to name mine DB contacts. That's a DB3 file extension. And then go ahead and give that a semicolon in that line. So that was our class level variable so that we could access that from anywhere inside of our activity that we were working on. So right here in our onCreate, I'm going to set up my database connection. This is just like we learned to do last time. So make sure to go back and review that if this isn't making any sense to you, because I'm going to go a little quick since we've already talked about this. But this is a new SQLite connection, and we give it that path to our database file that we just set up. And then remember, we have to create a table. And our table is always created around the object, that class type that we're wanting to use. Because what SQLite will do is take all these properties and whatever data type that they are expected to have and set us up a table so that everything matches. Our data layer matches our business layer, right? For those of you that ascribe to the 3-layer idea of software development. So this is a type contact. And so that will create our table. So once we have our connection, we have our table, we're good to go. We could go ahead and start inserting items in there, and that's actually what I want to do next. Because in order to then create a list and populate it, we're going to have some stuff in our database. So for the sake of some code artistry here, I'm going to actually do this in a separate method. So I'm going to set up this create contacts method, and I'm going to set up a couple of variables and a couple of objects here. So we have a name and we have a phone number for each one. And let's go ahead and create a few. So we have a couple of different objects to play with here. Okay, so once we've created our contacts, we can then go ahead and insert these objects into our table. Oh, I put a period on that. Okay, so instead of making you watch me create some contact objects, I just went ahead and popped these in here. So we have a couple of contact objects for us to play with, and then once we have the objects, we can store them in the table. And remember, we do that with db insert and our object name. So we're just going to do that 3 times, 1 for each object, and that will write those contacts right into that database table. Okay, so next let's hop over to our UI view and get into our toolbox. We're going to add a list view to our activity view here so that we can display each one of our contacts in a list, and then we're going to see how we can set up context menus so that when we press on one of those items, we can then get some a menu and some things that we want to do to that item. So we're going to grab that list view and just drop it right onto the window here. And I don't like to leave things their default names, so I'm going to name this contacts list view. Awesome. And so I always have to give myself a little build after I add things to the UI to make sure that they register. If you're ever having the trouble where when you do your find view by ID and it's not finding the UI elements that you're adding to your activity, give yourself a build after adding things to the UI. Sometimes that just shakes out the bugs, right? So clean build, all good. We should be good to go. So we're going to get our list view. So we'll just set this up. Find view by ID, list view. Okay, so lists and list views need a list adapter. A ListView adapter is basically the feed of data that is contained in row views that tells our list view what to display. And so we can implement a list view with different types of adapter classes depending on what it is that we're wanting to do. And we can also customize the appearance of a list view, and I've shown that in a previous video. So we're going to look at how do we add our adapter and then be able to set that up for context menus. So the last time we did this, or made an app with lists, I showed you how to use array adapter. An array adapter is great, right? It's super easy to use and it's simple, but that also means that it's pretty limited in terms of customization and the way that you want to display your data. So what I want to show you today is how to implement the list adapter. And so list adapter is a little different in that it is extremely customizable. So in our case where our data is a business object, we have maybe a collection of objects that you want to display, and you want to be able to change or customize the behavior of the list view for displaying that data, then we want to use a list adapter. And to get started using a list adapter, we have to actually implement a subclass of the base adapter class and override 4 specific items. And if you follow along with my blog, I talk a little bit more about this and why you have to do this and what those 4 items are. But let's look at how you would do that. So you come over to the Solution Explorer. We're going to right click on our solution. We are going to add a class. All right, so it's just a regular class, and you can name it whatever you like. And so I'm going to name this Home Screen Adapter. Right, great. Go ahead and add that, and when you get your code, we are going to override or inherit from and then override base adapter. And then we have to tell it what object type that we're actually using. We're using contact. Great. Okay, so it's immediately going to start throwing errors because you're not implementing the 4 things you have to implement, which are count, get item ID, get view, and this, the int indexer. So let's get started on making our class. So I'm going to set up 2 class level variables. One is going to be an array of items. I'm going to name it my contacts. And the other one is going to be an activity so that we can control the context activity that is calling our home screen adapter. So we're going to have a constructor and it's going to take in the activity and our array. If you're not familiar with the idea of inheritance and overriding and things like that, definitely check out the stuff that I have on my website about C#, just so that you get familiar with some of the syntax. You know, if you're not exactly sure what's going on with some of these things, if you've never seen a constructor that is calling the base class constructor before, go check out some of the stuff on my blog. That's my best advice. All right, so we have my contacts, and we have our context, just to make sure that we're being very explicit. So we have our constructor all set up to take in the 2 items that we need. We can now override the items that we have to override. So public override long get item ID. Right? And if you go ahead and hit tab, it's going to pop this in. So it takes int position. We don't want to throw a not implemented exception. We just want to return the position. Right? There's not anything special that we have to do here because we're not making any strange changes to the positioning of the list view from the adapter's point of view. We don't want to change the way the items show up in the list. So the next one we're going to do, public override string this, and it takes the int position. I'm sorry, not string, contact. Lost my mind there for a second. All right, so it also takes the position. We don't want any of this. So I do want the get. So in here, what we're doing is pretty much the same thing. We just want to return the position, and it's an array. So our my contacts position. So this property takes in the integer position number for whatever item it is that we're working with in our array. So in this case, our array being the my contacts array of type contact. And so all we want to do is return the position in the array of the item that it is referencing. Okay, next we are going to do count. And you see these things in the list. If you see them and you hit tab, right, then you just get all of this. Okay, so count just needs the number of items in the array. So we're just going to return my contacts.length, which is going to return the number of items in the array. And then finally, we're going to do getView. Okay, and getView is a method. So what getView does, so you can see we have position, convert view, and parent. So it returns a view for each row populated with the data that we're telling it to populate with. And we have this parameter for it to pass in an existing or an unused row for reuse if needed. So what we're going to do here, we had already set up to or we hadn't already set up. We want to set up to reuse an existing row if one is available. So what basically we're trying to do here, if you're removing items from your list view, like deleting items, which is something we can look how to do on the context menu, then we definitely want to be able to reuse the rows. We don't want to end up with weird blank spots in our list view. That would be strange. So we do this convert view, and so this sets up to reuse an existing row or existing view if one is available. All right, now we're going to check. If there isn't one available, then we want to make one. So if the view is null, then view equals our context. Oops, little context, which is our activity. We call the layout inflator inflate. And so the layout inflator inflate, we know that is how we basically create new views. And if that's not something that you already know, you can go check out my previous video that I've done on layouts. So we can choose here Android resource layout. What kind of layout do you want to use for your list? There are several. Simple drop down, simple gallery, simple list item, activated, checked. You can see there are all different ones in here. So just for a second here, I'd like to point out that the Xamarin documentation has a good breakdown of all of the different type of built-in views in Android resource layout. So if you're not sure what kind that you want, here are some great pictures. Maybe you want them to be able to select things. We want checkboxes or highlightable, or we don't care, or with pictures, right? So you can choose the kind of list view appearance that you want. So right now, for the sake of simplicity, let's just go with the simple list item 1. and you can always play around and kind of decide if you want to go for something else. So we're going to do a find view by ID. Okay, so here's where things get a little weird. We're going to get this text view, and in our Android resource ID, you're going to find a text1. I know it exists, but we didn't make it. And so that's going to equal to our my contacts and then the position value of whatever item is currently in my contacts. And we're going to call our toString to make sure that that converts like it should. So basically what's going on here is this is a built-in text field, text view inside of our list class that the list view uses to populate each list item. So while we don't have any item on our UI in our activity named text1, we didn't add any text views to the form, it still exists and we still use it. So now we just need to return the view. Okay, so let's give that a build and make sure that we're all good. Oops, I put that code totally right inside that if statement. That'll do it. There we go. Now give it a build. Good night. Okay, so we're setting this adapter, LV.adapter. It's a new home screen adapter because that's what we named our class that we overrode. We have that constructor that we created. So the activity context is this. It's expecting an array of type contact. Now we haven't set that up yet, so let's just go ahead and set that up. And I'm just going to do it right here so we can kind of quick and dirty make sure that our code is working and that it's displaying the stuff on the screen, and then we'll move on to some other things. So I'm just going to create an array named my contacts. You could use something else if you didn't want to use an array. Let's do like 30. Sure. Okay, so my contacts, this array is the other part that this constructor needs. And so we just need to take the items that are in our database and populate them into the array. Okay, so here's just a quick little for each loop that gets us each item in the database table and populates it into our array. Now let me tell you, there's something really cool that you could do here. And in the interest of time, I didn't show it to you because I wanted you to understand it before I started writing a bunch of funky code. But honestly, what's going on here could very well be going on in our home screen adapter class, so that when we actually get the items that we want out of the database, we could populate our adapter with that specific data so that we're not screwing around with this array business. So maybe I'll get to that in another tutorial here, but let's just give this a run. Let me go ahead and make sure that we build. But let's give this a run and see what we've got. Okay, so here is where we are. This is what it looks like right now. So you can see that we are displaying the 3 items. Let me see if I can get this in a better position. Okay, maybe that's better there. So you can see that we have the 3 items that we're displaying. Right now, if I do anything like click on them or whatever, like nothing's going to happen. So that's where we are so far. So because we are calling the toString method to determine how this item is shown in that text view, you could always manipulate the toString here in the class if you wanted to change how that information was displayed, or you have access to a couple of other resource IDs that are built in like this text view that we never created if you wanted to change how that information is displayed, because we've got this kind of customizable adapter. Okay, so let's keep moving towards our context menu. So one of the things that you have to do if you're going to use a context menu with your list view is register it for context menu. So we do register for context menu, and then we just put our LV in there. So we have to register the ListView for context menu so that the system knows the behavior to use. Now that's a little bit of a misnomer. So all you're basically doing is saying, hey, we're going to create a context menu. We have to actually tell the system, tell Android, how we want the list view to act when we want the context menu. So what we're going to do is we're going to override on create context menu. You'll find it in your IntelliSense. And so on create context menu is ultimately what is called when we register a list view for context menu. So this creates the context menu, and then we'll also have the on context item selected, which is the method that is called when you click on something in the list. So to set this up, we can see here we have a couple parameters. So we have our interface context menu, a view, and our interface context menu info, right? Best class name ever. All right, so what we're going to do in here is, first thing we're going to do is set our resource ID, our list view, to our view. So if v.id equals resource ID contact list view, that's our list view, then we're going to set up some stuff. So our info is our adapter view and adapter context menu info. That's that interfaced context menu info. I know, best class name ever. So the menu itself, which is that context menu interface, we're going to set header title to whatever you want to set it to. So in this case, I'm going to put menu title, and so I'll show you when we start the app what that actually looks like, and then you can decide if you want to change it. Var menu items. So menu items are the actual items that we want to show up in our context menu. So what we want to put here usually comes out of an XML file. And I thought maybe we'd already created it, totally forgot that we hadn't. So I went looking for something that didn't exist. So what we're going to do, we're going to come over to our Solution Explorer, and we are going to set up an XML file that is going to contain the items that we want to set up in our context menu. So very quick and easy. So inside of resources, there is a values and a strings file. This is typically where you would put this kind of information. So in this XML file, I'm going to set up a string array named menu. And inside this string array, we'll have an item. And so if we wanted to edit, we would put an item for edit. If we wanted to delete, oops, come on, fingers. We would put an item for delete. And so you could just decide how many things that you wanted to put inside. Oops, and I got outside of my resources section there. How many things you wanted to put inside of your context menu. So this, you have to pay attention to what you name it. This is what we're going to use over here in our menu items section. So it's resources dot get string array, and then it's resource dot array dot whatever you named it. Look, menu, there it is. Okay, then we iterate through the menu items, adding each one to the menu, right? This is the menu, that menu object. So just a simple for statement, int well, I is less than menu items dot length, iterating I, or incrementing I. So menu dot add. So you have a couple of options here. You can group them. You can just have regular titles. So if I'm just going to do menu.none. We're not doing a group. Item ID is whatever I is. Order ID is whatever I is. And then the title of the menu item is going to be menu item and then I, the value. And so this will iterate through our list, which we just had 2 items, and it will add it to the context menu. So as we click on each item, we should have an edit, we should have a delete. So next we would override, so public override on context, it's on context item selected. This is the method where we actually set up what we want to do when someone clicks on one of our menu items. Okay, so right now, when they select one of the items in the context menu, I just want to pop up a toast notification so that I know that it is working. And then later I'll show you how to actually hook up some actions like editing and deleting the item from inside that context menu. But let's just go ahead and look at how we can get some of the item information. So this object right here, this parameter on context item selected, contains the information about the item that is selected. So if we have the, if we want the info, we can get the adapter view, the context menu info. If we want to get the index of the item, we can do item.itemID. If we want the items in the menu, we could get that. And probably the most important part is like which item did they select. So in order to determine did they select edit, did they select delete, we're going to get the menu items just like we did above. In fact, it's going to look just like this. So I'm just going to grab it. So if you want the menu item name, then it's the menu items menu item index, or the index, sorry. That's item. So let's just pop up a toast notification. Oh, do we want the list item? Sure. Let's get the contact item. Let's get their name. Let's get the contact name. So that would be our array, which was my contacts, and then the position. Okay, so let's set up a little toast notification here. Actually, instead of index, let's do item.position. Where is it? Or not item, sorry, info. This object, info and item dot position. Excellent. All right, so toast. We're gonna make text. This for the context, and then string.format. Selected for item whatever. So it is the menu item name that they selected, and it is the contact name for whatever item that they selected. Set a toast length. Great. And then we do a dot show down here on the end. And then at the end we would just return true. So that will, we have a Boolean return that we have to make on context item selected. That's what it expects. Okay, so let's check it out. Go ahead and give it a build, make sure no problems, and then let's take a look at what this looks like on the phone. Okay, so here is our information on our device. We can see our list. Now to get the context menu, we press and hold until we get feedback from the device, usually at like zzz, And so here we can see our context menu. And so if I select edit, then there's my toast notification. So I press and hold, context menu, I press one of the items, and it says selected, delete for item Debbie and the phone number. So everything should be working as expected. Now this video has gotten far longer than my usual, so I think I'm going to stop here. Check in for another installment later. We'll do like a part 2 on this one. I want to show you how to take that on context item selected and not just return a toast, but if they actually click edit, then we can launch another activity for that. If they click delete, then we'll delete it from the database, and I want to show you how that works. So stick around. I'll put out another video probably in another week on how to do that. But I hope you've enjoyed this little foray into setting up a custom adapter for your list item and working a little bit with our SQLite database. We'll of course do much more of that in the next video as we start manipulating these items.